Oops. Hello, welcome. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I am Felicia from SweetGeorgia and the School of SweetGeorgia, and this is the live office hours for July. Summer is going by so quickly, so I was like, what are we doing right now? Nice to see you guys all in the chat. Good morning. Hello. Hi, Lily. Hi, Greta. Hi, Lisa, Jenna, Juliet. Thank you guys so much for being here. Let me know if this microphone is okay, if this setup is okay. Hi, Louise. Nice to see you too. Wonderful to see you guys in the chat. We are going to get started. So what we do is every month, the last Thursday of every month, we come here and we do a live office hour session for the School of SweetGeorgia. And in this time, we just catch up about things that are happening in the school, things that are happening behind the scenes. We talk about things that are upcoming. And I really, really love sharing some of the projects that you guys have posted inside the school, inside the forums, inside Discord, all of these kinds of things. So really excited and happy to see that you guys are all here. Thank you so much for making it. I am excited about today. As you can see, we are back here in the attic. Also very excited about this setup. So you guys can let me know how this is all going for you. So let's go to what we're going to talk about today. So today we have, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about some of the things that are top of mind right now. What is happening, sort of latest updates, what's coming, what are the upcoming events that we're going to be doing, community things as always. There's one Q&A. And then a lot of share your wins. All of that kind of stuff is coming up. So let's talk about it. So first thing is that you guys may or may have noticed changes to the website, and things will be sort of evolving and changing as we evolve and change. So one of the things that happened last week is that I got a year older. I celebrated a birthday, and I found that in this past year, I feel like I have changed a lot. Like my body's changed a lot. Lots of things have changed about me, including my eyesight has changed a lot. And I've been a graphic designer since like I was 20 years old. And I remember when I was around 20, I was thinking, oh, I love making all of my fonts super light, super thin. I printed my business cards in fine, thin, silver gray lettering. And I was like, this is so cool. And I loved it. I loved how it looked and everything like that. And I just didn't ever realize that probably majority of the people that I handed my business card to couldn't read my business card. They couldn't read what I had written. And so it has gone with, evolving our website, evolving our patterns, evolving our printed materials. The further and further along we get, the further and further I realize that, hey, I want to make things more readable. I want to make things easier for people to read so that they're not struggling to see things in the dark, that their typeface is not too fine, it's not too small, all of these kinds of things. And so over time, you might have seen like last week, we started to evolve. Also, the SweetGeorgia website has changed. We have a new font going on over there as well. And we are bringing those changes also to the School of SweetGeorgia as well, trying to make the typeface more legible, bigger, more open, more readable. You can see here, like in this little photo that I have here, there's our old pattern, our old printed pattern for one of our knitting patterns, and one of our newer patterns that we're sort of moving towards. And you can already see just in this tiny little photo, like the older pattern, the typeface is smaller, it's a little bit lighter, it is a lot more difficult to read. And so as we go through and we're updating a lot of our older patterns and things like that, we're reknitting them, we're doing new colors, we're doing all sorts of different things with our older patterns. And so we're bringing those back, looking at them again, revitalizing and reviewing them for things like typeface changes, all of those kinds of things. Yeah, just trying to improve things to make things more readable for everybody. We have always had this foundation of trying to make the school really accessible to everybody. That's part of the reason why we spend a lot of time doing captions, doing subtitles, making transcripts. There's a lot of work that happens behind the scene to sort of create all of these transcripts so that people have multiple ways of accessing the content. And so just trying to make the content easier for everybody to consume. So one of the other things that's happened in with our weaving patterns is that like you'll notice this in our double weave class where we looked at the colors that we're using in the weaving drafts, and rather than trying to get everybody to sort of discern the difference between 4 colors that are kind of similar, we started to convert a lot of those colors to colors and symbols or shapes, so that again, it would be more easily readable, more easily recognizable what those different colors are supposed to be. So those are kinds of some of the things that are happening behind the scenes for trying to adapt and evolve our own website, our own materials, to making things easier for everybody. So wonderful. Yes, I am so close to getting reading glasses. So close. It's happening. The other thing that has been on my mind is, how has your summer been going? How have things been going? I mean, we just spent July. Many of the people in the community I know have been working on Tour de Fleece and spinning a lot, so I have a lot of things to show about that as well. But yeah, Tour de Fleece, a lot of spinning's been happening. But what else have you been working on? Have you been going on vacation? Have you been taking a break? All of these kinds of things. And so I think I mentioned earlier that I have a number of travel plans starting next Wednesday. And a lot of it is traveling with my family and trying to figure out, well, like, what could I bring on a trip? What should I bring? Should I start a new knitting project? I started a few that have sort of not gone anywhere because of poor decisions on my part. But like, should I start another knitting project? Should I start a Fair Isle sweater for Knit City? Should I, work on the MCAL shawl that's going to be coming up in August 15th? Or I did actually start a crochet project. There's this, it's kind of like granny squares, but they're like square motifs that are puff stitches and all these kinds of things. And I've made 2 of them. I believe I need to make 14. So I could do something like that. So crochet project, spinning. I have these beautiful little Jenkins Turkish spindles. I have a couple of them. They're so tiny, they're so cute. They like literally fit in the palm of your hand. I could perhaps take this with me in the car, have it sit in my lap, and I could spin in the car. That's something I could do. Maybe supported spindle is also very, very compact. I've been thinking a lot about like the time I took a road trip to Sun Peaks and I wove on a frame loom during that time. But what if I took like a small handheld tapestry loom and sat in the car and did a little bit of tapestry? And so I showed, these are the larger looms that Jana has been making at Everly Textiles. This is a gorgeous one. This is a walnut loom. When we did our tapestry study group last summer, we had the smaller looms, the mini looms that we were working with. And this is a little bit of a larger, like a larger size. It looks like about a letter size kind of working width. And that's really, really nice. Maybe that could sit in my lap. So there's those kinds of ideas. Oh, and yes, Juliet is here too. Juliet, I'm sharing a photo that you took of you spinning boucle on, I believe that's a boat in the background, with that e-spinner from Dreaming Robots. That's the EEW6, I believe. And yeah, that's something that could also, if you hook that up to some battery power, maybe that could sit in your lap and sit on a road trip or something like that. But again, I was thinking about all these things. And then I think it was Chen Chen at Craft Atelier in Singapore. She left me a message. She's like, or you could just make nothing. You could just take a break. You could just rest. And so I've been thinking about that too. Like, what about just taking a break? About not doing, what would I do? Would I sit there in the car for 5 hours and just look out the window? I mean, that's what we ask the kids to do, right? So why wouldn't I do that too? So in any case, these are some of the things that I have been thinking about, wondering what you guys are working on. If you are traveling, if you are going on vacation, and if you are crafting at the same time, or if you are just taking a break. That could be fun too. Yes, absolutely. So you guys are, oh yes, absolutely. If you want to ask questions today, you can definitely pop them in the chat, and then we have a section later on where we're going to do a tiny little bit of Q&A, and I can answer questions there for sure. Absolutely. Greta's saying, I thought taking a break of crafting, but family is visiting, so it's perfect excuse, and I think it's been good for you. Yeah, to take a break. Maybe take a break. Yeah, I think that when you do travel, you give yourself and your brain an opportunity to see things from definitely a different perspective. I found every time I travel, I come back with ideas, I come back with my brain reset, refreshed. And so I have been thinking about like if I'm sitting in the car trying to make something when really, life is literally passing by me, it's probably a good idea to just stop and take a break and see what's around. So let's talk about what is coming up next. So I did want to highlight for you guys the things that have just recently come out, and that is the lace weaves with Laura Fry. Um, that has two patterns to go with it. And so if you've ever been interested in learning how to weave Huck lace or Bronson lace, this is the time that we can do it. So this is why I wanted to highlight this for you. This is something that I've been really wanting to learn. If you go back into some of our old live office hours, there have been projects that people have woven with Huck lace, with like multiple colors, Huck and handspun. Like there's lots of beautiful things that you can do with this new weave structure. And so I encourage you guys to dive in and have a look at that. We also have the Spin-In Clinic, which is with Kim McKenna. And that is about, again, like taking people from taking spinners from whatever level they're at and helping them kind of improve from wherever you're at. So if you're someone who has just started spinning on a wheel, what's the next thing to consider? What's the next thing to consider? If you're somebody who's been spinning on a wheel for 7 years, what's the next thing that you should do? What's the next thing to consider? All of that kind of stuff. The next thing is August 2nd, which is next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, Thursday, this is going to come out. So this is a sort of like a part 2 of a class that Charlotte taught for us about dyeing, and it is about dyeing large quantities of yarn. So I believe in June, we launched the class with Charlotte about dyeing large quantities of fiber, spinning fiber. But this one is about yarn. So what do you do when you have to dye like a sweater's worth of yarn? You want to dye 8 skeins at a time, 10 skeins at a time. How do you do that? How do you do that so that all of the skeins are consistent and even? How do you do it ergonomically? Like if you're putting them all in a giant pot, how do you carry a pot that's 50 pounds of boiling water? All of those kinds of things. We talk about those things in the class with Charlotte. So that is coming up next week. Yeah, so I hope that you guys will check that one out. And then also, I don't know if you guys have seen, there have been several videos that have come out on our YouTube channel, and they're sort of like clips from Charlotte showing how to do some yarn management techniques. So like how to wind on a nostopane, how to convert skeins from skeins to balls, all these kinds of things. So she's done a number of yarn management tutorials as well. How to wind a ball by hand. How do you go about doing that if you don't have tools and all of that kind of stuff? And so there's a lot of like little tutorials that have been coming out on YouTube from Charlotte as well. So you guys can hopefully have a look at that. As well, in August, we have this class coming out, and this is actually a long class that we filmed with Rachel Smith from Welford Pearls or from Woolen Spinning, and this is a class all about spinning luxury fibers. So we started off at the beginning of the year spinning things like silk. There was 4 different kinds of silk that Rachel explored and looked at the different texture, how do you spin this, all of this kind of stuff. And then the second module was about spinning camelids. So, look, we were spinning cashmere, no, we're spinning yak, we're spinning llama, camel. And then this one is about goats and rare and blends. So like mohair. Mohair is one of the things that we're talking about. Cashmere is one of the things that we're talking about. So all of those things are in Rachel's class. So if you have ever wanted to spin mohair straight, this is something that we would look at as well. So yeah, these are all in the SOS. There's lots of stuff in the SOS. Oh yes, Greta's just posted a cashmere, mohair, and pygora. Yes, yak and angora. Yeah. So lots and lots of things to explore with that. And that is coming out August 16th. And so that will be on the site and you guys can have a look at that. Yay! It's very, very exciting. We do have kits to go with all of these luxury fibers. So if you've ever wanted to test any one of these different fibers and things like that, then we have those as well if you're interested. Yeah. upcoming events. Now, this is something we wanted to spend some time talking about. So this is our August calendar. This is our August calendar. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is that we're trying to find more times to do more co-working sessions. So I'm just going to quickly look at the calendar with you guys. So August, we have a number of different co-working sessions set up. Normally we've been doing them on Friday afternoons at 1 p.m. So those are there. Normally I do a live stream Taking Back Friday on the second Friday of every month. But because I'm going to be out of town that second Friday, I've moved it to the following Friday. So it's going to be Friday the 18th of August. It's going to be a live Taking Back Friday stream. That's not like an SOS thing. It's not a school thing, but we talk about a lot of behind the scenes things about what's happening at Sweet Georgia. So that's why we post it here. As well, we have our live office hours. It's usually the last Thursday of every month. But again, that has been moved up as well to the 24th because I, again, am out of town on the 31st. So that's where two of the things have moved. There's also a Learn to Spin Q&A. This Thursday session is going to be happening with Kim McKenna. And so if you have watched the Spin In Clinic, or if you have watched any of Kim McKenna's spinning courses, or if you just have spinning questions in general, this is a Zoom call where Kim McKenna will be available, and then you guys can also ask her questions directly. We have, as always, we have our knitting meetups on Mondays. These are with Robin. Again, you can bring whatever craft you want. But Robin, I believe behind the scenes, has been doing a lot of supported spindling and has been doing a lot of machine knitting. So that's where a lot of things have been happening. And Vicky, who I believe is here in the chat as well, she is available on Saturdays to do this meetup, which is about weaving and spinning. But of course, again, you can bring whatever you happen to be working on. So let's talk a little bit more. Yes, Greta saying you don't want to miss the Q&A with Kim McKenna. Kim McKenna is an amazing spinning teacher. Such an incredible wealth of information. Yes, definitely go. So the co-working stuff, I wanted to share with you guys more about the co-working because I feel like this was an experiment that really, really, really worked. It worked. I know that when Tabitha sort of proposed this idea, she said that she does it with her writing groups, and basically everybody gets on a Zoom call for about an hour and they just head down, everybody's on mute, and everybody is there working on their own thing. And because you have somebody on the other side of the screen also working at the same time, you feel compelled to continue working, even if you feel a little bit unfocused, or you might feel a little bit distracted. You want to get up and get a snack, or you want to get up and do something. Like, because there's someone else there, you feel compelled to stay and focus on your own work. And so we tried it with some of the members of the SOS, and it works. We set the schedule for 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on Fridays, and I would be there in the studio working. And so this entire overshot sampler in the photo here, this would not have happened if I had not made time to go to this co-working session. So everything about like setting up the warp on this loom, weaving, trying different things, like experimenting, each segment of this overshot sampler was woven in the co-working sessions. And so there's no talking. It's just great to show up and do it. And so you can see I was working through some of the issues with, trying to weave these circles and ending up with ovals and all sorts of things like that. But I worked it all out because I had time to sit there during a co-working session. So in any case, I feel like it works. I feel like when you come, you actually get things done. And so we wanted to be able to provide more of these sessions. Now in August, I am, again, out of it quite for many, many weeks. And so Vicky is going to host some of those Friday sessions. I will host a couple of sessions. And then we also have a session on Thursday. August 3rd at 7:30 Pacific time, 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time with Charlotte. And so she wanted to host an evening session. And so again, we're trying to see if we can offer some more times, offer some more opportunities for people to meet. Maybe evening time is better for you, or 7:30 Pacific Standard Time is better for you. And so we're going to try and experiment and add a few more sessions at different times. And so we're thinking, I think Greta said that in September, she might host an evening as well on a Monday night, I believe is what she said. So that kind of thing is coming up and happening. So more co-working sessions. I feel like it works. I'm so happy to see the people who come every Friday. And I feel like, yeah, we do get things done. So really, really excited about that. E. Kelly's asking, when is the Q&A with Kim McKenna? Let me see if I can go back to that slide. And I it's too tiny, I can't read it. Okay, so Greta's saying it's August the 17th. It's a Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You guys are testing my eyesight. I can't see it, it's too small. Okay, so upcoming activities. What do we have upcoming? So August, like I mentioned, the new course on dyeing large quantities of yarn with Charlotte was coming out in August 16th. Oh no, August 2nd. And at the studio, I'm going to post hopefully very soon, but at the studio, a number of our team members have been dyeing along with Charlotte the past couple of weeks. They've been dyeing fiber. They've been creating their own hand-painted colorways. There's just been a lot of like learning about dyeing happening with our team. And so that's been really, really fun because these are people who don't typically work as dyers. They are doing other kinds of sort of roles. So like Leah is editing many of the videos that go on the school, and she's not a dyer, but she has been learning how to dye from Charlotte and from watching the fiber dyeing class and from watching this yarn dyeing class and all these kinds of things. And so that's been happening behind the scenes. So that's been really, really fun to observe and see people diving into the dyeing part of things. Now, in September, we were going to do a spin along. September, usually we do a little bit of spinning, spin along. And I was saying that I was going to spin for socks. I really wanted to work through some of the different yarn structures that Rachel had talked about in her spinning for socks class. And so, yeah, a number of different kinds of yarns, like, you know, like a 4-ply or a cabled yarn. There was a Hauser yarn, there was crepe yarn. So trying a lot of different things, and I wanted to crank them on the CSM and see how that all looked. But at the same time, I know that a lot of spinners right now are focused on spinning yarn to use in weaving. So we actually even created a Discord channel called Weaving with Handspun. You guys can go look it up if you're in the Discord already. But we started this new channel to just chat and share about things that we're spinning that will eventually be used for weaving, talking about weaving with handspun. If you guys have followed Diana Twist, she's also one of our spinning instructors for the School of SweetGeorgia. Diana Twist has been posting on Instagram about this amazing rainbow colored blanket that she has woven from all of her rainbow colored handspun yarn. And so Diana, she teaches our color and fiber play classes on the SOS. It's a lot about blending different colors, creating gradients, creating rainbows, all these kinds of things. And I believe she's been spinning them all and now weaving with her handspun. So this is something that we all want to kind of like try a little bit about: spinning, taking your handspun yarn and figuring out how to weave with it. And so as part of this, we do have content coming out soon that is going to be sort of like in an article format from Debbie Held. Debbie is also one of our spinning instructors for the SOS. She's taught the textured yarn class, she's taught the e-spinner class, and she's taught a supported spindle class. And so she's been writing up some content about how to weave with your handspun yarn on something very simple like a rigid heddle loom. And those articles are going to come out over the coming weeks and months. And then after that, we are hopefully going to do a weave along together. So we're going to do a weave along where you take your handspun and we're going to put it into a rigid heddle loom and weave something with it and just experiment, see how that feels, see how that all works, see the amazing color transformations that happen when you put handspun yarn and make it into a hand-woven cloth. It's going to be super, super fun. So that we're hoping is going to happen probably closer to about November. I didn't put it on here on this slide because I want the exact date. Diana Twiss's IG is, I think it's Diana Twiss. DianaTwiss. And Janet is asking what is the Discord and where to find it. So I'm going to show that in the next couple of slides. But yes, the Discord is sort of like a platform where more casual chat is happening. It's not like an official SOS thing. It's more like a Sweet Georgia community. Like anybody who wants to chat about spinning and weaving and dyeing and all of that kind of stuff can hang out on Discord. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Yes, thank you. Bridget has just posted the link to Diana's Instagram account there. And then September, I did also want to mention at the end of September, every year, I think this is going to be like the 8th or 9th year, is Knit City. So Knit City is the yarn festival that happens in Vancouver, and Sweet Georgia has been a sponsor of Knit City since day one. Since pre-day one. And we're excited to host the lounge again. We're going to sponsor the lounge. This year's lounge is going to be different from last year's lounge and in years prior. This year, we're going to make it much more sort of, we're hoping to make it much more compact and cozy and a space where there's going to be more demonstrations. We're going to do weaving demonstrations, hopefully some other fiber arts demonstrations, spinning, meetups. Maybe I'll bring my CSM, not entirely sure. But we're hoping to do these demos and have meetups. And I think in the past we've been like, oh yeah, you know, like if you're a member of the SOS, come over and say hi and all these kinds of things. And we've never had a set time for a meetup for all of the SOS members to come and kind of meet each other. But maybe we set up an actual time and then everybody can come and hang out at that time. And then you get to actually meet your fellow SOS members in person. If you're in Vancouver, or come to Vancouver for it. It's great. People travel in for this event. So yeah, we would be excited to meet everybody all at the same time. That would be actually pretty cool. So we'll have more information about that coming up in the coming weeks, obviously, but September is coming very, very soon. And then, of course, in October, every October, we do Socktober. And this year, the course that's going to launch about socks is going to be about knitting socks 2 at a time on like long circular needles. And so Tabitha recorded that class with us earlier this year. And we're going to launch that knitting socks 2 at a time. And so that might be the Socktober theme, or it might just be knitting socks with hand spun, knitting socks with hand dyed yarn, knitting socks however you like. So that is that for what's coming up. And again, yeah, it's not on this list, but weave along with hand spun is coming. So let's talk quickly about the community stuff. As a review, if this is your first time here, and if you guys have never actually jumped into the community forums at the school we consider is kind of like these two halves. One half is content where there's videos, where there's study guides, all of that kind of stuff. There's the content and the learning stuff about the school. And then the other half of the school is very, very active community. And so if you go into the community tab of the website, you will find yourself in this space, which is a discussion forum where you can ask questions, where you can share what you've been working on, where you can have you can make very in-depth notes about even what you've made, how you've made something, all of this kind of stuff. This forum has been going since 2018. And so the amount of information and knowledge in the community forums is quite a lot now. And so if you are curious about something, you can always go into the forums and do a search, and hopefully you'll find answers to what you were thinking about. But I'm always continued to be impressed by all of the projects that get posted, all of the knowledge and the learning that gets shared in here. So that is one space that I encourage you guys to go check out if you have not already. So that's the community forums. The other part of the community is there are these groups, these interest groups. And so this is where people are sort of sharing in-depth notes about what they have been working on. So for example, in say like the natural dyeing group, people are talking about, oh, I'm experimenting with all of these different mordants and then showing all of the results of their experiments. In the spinning group, they might say, this is what my unwashed fleece looks like, a lock of my unwashed fleece, and then making notes about like, this is how I washed it, this is what happened to it afterwards, blah, 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 blah. And so all of that is in those study groups. So I encourage you also to look in these groups. A ton of information, tons and tons of learning. So that is where you would find that. So those are the main areas in the school where we're having a lot of these conversations. The next thing is that early this year, maybe January this year, we started this Discord chat. And so Discord is basically like a third-party service. Discord is actually a software company that started a chat software for people who are playing video games. So if you're playing video games with somebody and you want to have like a chat with them while you're playing, you could set up a space on Discord. But Discord is being used for lots of different kinds of communities now, not just video game communities. And so we're using Discord as well. And hopefully you can see in here, like we've organized our Discord server to have all of these different channels. So there might be channels for the different make-alongs that we're working on for Sweet Georgia. So we have our mystery knit-along coming up in August 15th. That is all going to be on that mystery knit-along channel. We did a color along earlier this year. We did our Tour de Fleece was in here as well. And so our weave along will also have some casual chat in here as well. We've also broken it down into the different crafts. So if you just want to talk about crochet, there's a channel for that. If you just want to talk about machine knitting, there is a channel for that. Or if you just want to talk about punch needle, we also made a punch needle chat. So this is kind of like a space where you can just check in like once every couple of days and you see all the things that people have been working on. It's a little bit more casual and more short form than the discussion forums. The community forums tend to be longer posts, much more detailed, much more like experiment driven notes, detailed observations, and Discord is more like quick chat. So that's fantastic. Yeah. So if you need to learn how to get onto or need to learn about the Discord channel, there is a blog post link here at the bottom of this page of this slide. That's a blog post about it. And then if you want to just join the Discord, it's just sweetgeorgiayarns.com/Discord, and it will send you there and you will be invited to the group and all of those kinds of things. So for Q&A, I know you were asking, there was a question earlier on here. I'm trying to scroll back. You can see me scrolling back. Enduring is, I want to know more about why my several decades old Mira isn't treadling well when I have the warp tight. I'm 5'7" and not weak. The treadles are hard to push. Yes. So I have found also with my baby wolf loom, which is a jack loom, that when you have the warp cranked on super, super tight, then it is hard to treadle because you're pushing down, you're actually having to kind of pull the warp because the warp has to change shape, which means it needs a little bit of slack in order to change shape. When you lift the shafts, you're changing the geometry of that warp and it's no longer like this. You're making it you're raising it, and by raising it, you need a longer distance between the front of the loom, the back of the loom, and where that shaft is. And so that longer distance, you're either stretching your warp or you're going to feel resistance against trying to raise those shafts. So I would just suggest maybe like loosening the tension on your warp just a little bit and seeing if that helps more with being able to treadle your loom. My Mira loom or my Fanny loom downstairs is also several decades old. I think it's almost 50 years old. I think. So yeah, I think it's almost 50 years old. And it's working well. And so I feel like these looms can work for, we've seen Leclerc looms that are 100 years old and still working. So I don't think it's anything about it being an old Mira, but if you loosen the warp tension a little bit, maybe it will be a little bit easier for you to treadle. So hopefully that will help. We did have another question over here and on the community forums, and it was about fiber reactive dyeing. And so This is a question from Paula, and she was saying, "Hi, I can't find this answer to this anywhere. I know that it is possible to keep adding protein fibers to acid dye baths to help exhaust whatever color is left. Would it be possible to do the same with a fiber reactive dye bath? Wouldn't it be a good way to dye gradients since the colors will continue to get lighter as the dye bath is reused? Thanks in advance." And so there is a link to the whole conversation about the fiber reactive dye bath. And then I put in a link to our fiber reactive dye course. And so, yes, on the school, we teach 3 different kinds of dyeing. The first and the easiest thing is acid dyeing, and that is what we use. Acid dyes we use for dyeing wool. Wool, silk, protein fibers, animal fibers, all those classes that Charlotte is teaching about dyeing fiber, dyeing large quantities of yarn, all of that is focused on acid dyeing. We did also a number of classes about dyeing with natural dyes. So that's a whole other sort of area of dyeing. And then there's this one area of dyeing where we have done a couple of classes. We've done the fundamentals of fiber reactive dyes, and we did a shibori dyeing class. And those 2 classes were focused on fiber reactive dyes, or also known as Procyon MX dyes. And so Procyon dyes or fiber reactive dyes, they dye cellulose fiber. So cotton and linen, ramie, all of those kinds of textiles. Fiber reactive dyes and acid dyes function very differently with very, very different chemistry. And so with acid dyes, the dye molecule is floating around in the dye bath, and then it will bind to the protein fiber when there's heat and when there's acid. So those things make it bind to the fiber. Otherwise, the acid dye is still floating around in the water and it's not binding to anything. It only activates when there's the protein fiber present, and then there's heat and then acid present. Fiber reactive dyes are really different. They feel like a little bit of a mystery to me in some ways, and really strange. But when you look at fiber reactive dyes, like these jars here, they're all fiber reactive dyes. When you work with fiber reactive dyes, the dyes themselves, they're not activated by necessarily heat. They bind over time, and they bind even to the water in the dye bath, which is why when you're working with fiber reactive dyes, if you've looked at some of different courses and things like that, you try to kind of minimize how much water you use in a lot of cases, because the dyes will bind to the water and then become unavailable to bind to the fiber itself. It sounds bizarre. But this is why, like, at the end of the day, when you're working with acid dyes, the end of the day, the dye bath should be clear because all of the dye molecules are in the wool fiber. But when you're working with Procyon dyes or fiber reactive dyes, a lot of the dyes have dyed the water. And so at the end of the day, the dye bath can be completely inactive, but the dye bath will still be full of color. It looks like there's color that could be used to dye stuff, but actually all of that dye is inactive. It will not bind to anything anymore because it's already bound to the water. We do, Juliet, we do have a fiber reactive dyeing class on the school. Yes, so it is conceptually different. Chemistry is different. And so for that reason, it's very difficult to go and look at your fiber reactive dye bath and it looks like there's color in it and you want to put like fabric or you want to put yarn into it and you want to soak up that extra color, but it actually won't work. It might stain it a little bit, but it won't bind. And so for that reason, I feel like with the fiber reactive dyes, you have to think about it completely differently. You kind of like have to have a concept of measuring out how much dye you want, and then time is of the essence. You have to like combine it with your substrate pretty quickly and allow it to have time to sit and bind to the fabric or the fiber. You want to minimize how much water is in there because otherwise the dye will just bind to the water. Minimize the water so that way you can encourage the dye to bind to the substrate. So it's a lot of that kind of thinking different ways of thinking. I would really love to be able to explore more about fiber reactive dyeing in the future and do maybe like a study group on that specifically, because it is so different. But because majority of us who are working with the fiber arts, at least now in our community, we are spinning with wool, we are weaving with our wool hand spun, or we are knitting with things that we've spun. We're working with a lot of protein fiber. And so we don't really have that much time spent working with cotton or linen, say. But one day it would be great to be able to explore more about this, dyeing with cotton, maybe dyeing cotton warps, all of that kind of stuff, and then explore the different kinds of chemistry, because it's just a different way of looking at things. And so, yeah, you can't really dye gradients with this leftover Procyon dye bath. You kind of have to calculate your gradients ahead of time and then dye them like that. Yes. Fantastic. So Juliet's saying, I need to take that class. I have a bunch of used leftover reactive dye powders that a friend gave me. Yeah, I do too. My garage is full of dye powder that should be used. It's very interesting, actually. This week at the studio, actually, the reason why I'm here in my attic is because at the studio we have a fiber arts camp going on for all of the kids. Just kids anywhere from about 7 years old all the way up to 13 years old are doing fiber arts, different fiber arts, with Katrina Stewart from Crafty Jacks, also one of our instructors on the SOS. And so Katrina has taught them spinning, she's taught them knitting, she has taught them needle felting, and they've done ice dyeing. And so ice dyeing is done with fiber reactive dyes. And basically, the idea is that you have your fabric and then you have some ice on it, and then you put fiber reactive dye powder on top. And as the ice melts, the temperature of the ice can sometimes like break and shift colors, and then the dyes will kind of like fall onto the fabric, and over time it will bind to the fabric, and there's no heat involved. You just sprinkle it on the ice and then let it sit overnight, and then you wash it out the next day. And I was watching Katrina do the washout, and in the washout is all this dye colored water coming out. And so it looks like it's bleeding, but it's not. It's just inactive dye. It's bound inactive dye. So that's that. Now let's talk about what you guys have posted. Janet Beavers is asking, is the dye powder safe? So we do talk about in our dyeing classes that every time we use dye powder, we always have a mask on. We have a respirator on. Yeah, we always use respirators when we're around dye powder. That's the only time where this powder can like fly everywhere. And so, yeah, that's definitely something. The dye powder, you want to like open the container very, very carefully so that it's not spraying dye powder everywhere. We wear a respirator, we use exactly what we need, and then we put it away right away. So we're not leaving open containers of dye powder anywhere. That's the only place where I feel like there's a risk, is the inhalation risk of very, very fine dye powder. Fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about what you guys have made. Tour de Fleece, lots and lots of Tour de Fleece skeins. And so these ones are from Tasha. So she took a picture of 6 skeins of yarn that she dyed for Tour de Fleece. So here we have 3 pairs of skeins so far. On the left, scraps of top spun worsted plied with Cordale for DK yarn that will become the Musselburgh hat. In the middle, there are high twist Polworth in fingering weight, which is being paired with an existing handspun for a shawl. And then the original fluffy long draw from Mill Waist, which I might weave into a cowl. And so those are the things that have come up for Tasha over this past month of doing Tour de Fleece skeins. So congratulations on that. That's a lot of yarn. It's fantastic. And then I have Tour de Fleece skeins from Janine as well. So she says, hi, Tour de Fleeceers. I'm new here at SOS, so I thought I'd just jump in. I love Tour de Fleece and how it makes me fall in love with spinning all over again. So here is some merino bamboo that I spun on my Shacked Matchless. I have several wheels, and one of my Tour de Fleece goals is to spin at least one braid of each of them. Next up is to begin a BFL and silk blend for a sweater. So I can't wait to see what everybody spins during Tour de Fleece. That is gorgeous. Beautiful. It's like very, very shiny. I think it's because of the bamboo in it. That cellulose fiber makes it a little bit shiny. And more hand spun. This one was actually really, really gorgeous. So I want you guys, if you can, go to the community and look at this particular thread. This thread is fantastic because Elizabeth talks about, she shows like the different fibers that she used and how she spun them. But this is actually a 3-ply yarn, a round 3-ply yarn. And originally she spun a hand-painted or hand-dyed merino top, dyed by Fiber Love Diary. And then because the 2-ply, I think she thought it was a little bit too fine. So then she wanted to make it into a 3-ply yarn. So then she added 1 ply of natural Romney that was spun. And so 3-plied all of this together. And she said, I'm excited about finally knitting with my hand spun. And this will become the Everyday Cowl by Andrea Mowry. So you guys can see, I posted both photos here. This one and this one. So this is seeing that hand spun knit up is really, really, really lovely. So congratulations on that. I love seeing hand spun in action. Using up the hand spun is fantastic. So that's really, really nice to see that it's actually being spun for Tour de Fleece, but now also like going into the next project, whether it's a knitting project or a weaving project. It's fantastic. Yes, wonderful. I'm just looking back here at the chat so I don't miss anything. So Nina is saying, taking a class about dyeing with plants next week. I'll try to watch the Fiber Reactive Dye class before that. I totally forgotten that you had a class about that, for sure. So yes, and then Anita is letting me know that yes, the children in the Fiber Arts class were also wearing masks when they were doing the dyeing, for sure. Janet saying, beautiful Tour de Fleece yarns. Yes, beautiful yarns, everybody. Such beautiful work. This live group is giving me inspiration. After a long break, I'm getting reacquainted with spinning. I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah, so there's been lots and lots of spinning updates this past month that have been really inspiring. I also have been spinning a lot every month, every night, and looking forward to using some of that yarn up. I have some photos of my finished yarn that I'm really excited to share, but I can't share just yet. But excited about that. Next up, we have a whole bunch of weaving projects I wanted to share. And so this is Brianna S. This is the Square One Scarf. And the Square One Scarf is the project that I put in the sort of the very, very basic, like the rigid heddle weaving class. So the rigid heddle weaving basics class. Oh, I forgot to put the link in there. But yeah, the Rigid Heddle Weaving Basics class, just basically how to set up your rigid heddle loom, how to weave plain weave, experimenting with different colors. And so when I made mine, I put hand-painted yarn in the warp and then hand-painted yarn in the weft. And you can see sort of colors mixing and blending. And so here, Brianna has used 3 different colors for her warp. It looks fantastic. Second project on my rigid heddle loom. I'm pleased with how it turned out. It's very fun to see how the yarns blended. Yes, that is the most fun part of weaving, is seeing the hand-dyed colors, hand-spun colors, all of this stuff mixing and blending together in this fabric. So that turned out really, really well. I love the colors used here. So congratulations on that, Brianna. It's second ever rigid heddle project. I have here hand-woven shawls by Allison. So if you go to this particular thread, summer project so far, Allison has woven, this is just one of, I think like 6 or 7 shawls that have been woven. And so she says, I have a lot of fringe twisting and wet blocking and steaming to do yet, which I am saving for a rainy day. But here are my summer projects so far. I hope everyone's having a great summer filled with time to make things. So Allison has tons of hand-woven projects that she has finished as well. So yeah, I wanted to share at least one of the very many shawls that she's woven. And then I have Nina. Nina is here as well in the chat today. Congratulations, Nina, on this gorgeous shawl. So Nina has woven this overshot shawl, and it says wet finishing did wonders. This time I really took a deep breath and pressed the iron directly on the fabric. The temperature on very, very high. It was the best decision. The fabric changed visually into a much more stable, beautiful cloth. Love it. So I encourage you also to check out Nina's learning plan. This thread is fantastic. Last month we talked about the kitchen towels that she wove. There's like checkered kitchen towels. And then I think there was a bit of a conversation about wet finishing. And then Laura Fry, again, she's one of our weavers teaching weaving on the SOS. She has a class about wet finishing for weavers. And she talks about the importance of not just like wet finishing and, like, yeah, not just washing your fabric, but wet finishing your fabric and then pressing your fabric. Pressing, giving it a hard press, because the press allows the fibers to kind of more permanently bend into the interlacement that it has been given. And so it changes the texture and the feel and the drape of your fabric after you have given it a good hard press. And so this is exactly what Nina has discovered, I think, by putting the iron directly on the fabric. Of course, you don't want to burn your fabric. You want to, putting you have to be careful. But yeah, Greta has posted the link to the Magic in the Water class, the wet finishing for weavers class. And so that one, yeah, how scary to add that hot iron. I think you have to be very careful. I would probably, if you have a sample of your fabric, like maybe like a little sample testing part of your fabric, maybe press on that first to just make sure that you're not going to damage your actual project. But this is absolutely gorgeous. So congratulations, Nina, on that. And I think you're already on to the next project, I believe. This one I wanted to show because this is Caitlin R. There's so many things to discuss about this. So Caitlin actually is raising fiber animals. I believe she has an Angora bunny, and then she has 2 mohair goats. And the mohair goats are named Knit and Pearl. And the Angora bunny is named Bun Me. So cute. But Caitlin is talking about how she's taken some fleeces and washed them via a suet vat. And I didn't entirely know what that was, and so I had to do a little bit of research. But basically the idea is that you can put your fleece in a basin of water, and then the bacteria that is on the fleece will ferment and clean the fleece itself. It's very, very interesting. I don't know enough about this to say much more about this, but this is something that maybe we could do a little bit of research into and learn a little bit more about, because it's a different way of washing fleece. We do have a class with Kim McKenna talking about how to work from fleece, and there's Kim's method of washing fleece, which is very, very effective. But it's just very interesting to hear about this other method, this suet vat method. And Caitlin is saying that the mohair came out much cleaner compared to the unwashed stuff. And then she's been combining the mohair with some Cormo Corriedale wool, which sounds delicious, actually. Sounds wonderful. And so she says, my plan is to spin, then dye, and then make some socks. So, wow, really, really interesting area to explore. But it's just interesting because Caitlin has these fiber animals that she can kind of like learn with and from. So I'm really, really interested to follow Caitlin's whole learning plan and her journey and what she's exploring, what she's learning about working with the fiber straight from the source and what she's going to end up making from that. So again, I put the link here. I always put the links to everybody's learning plans and all these threads so that you guys can go in and take a look and learn a little bit more about what she's working on. And then this one, I'm really, really, really proud to share. This is from Linda. Linda's post starts with, I am the boss. So we brought up Linda's learning plan earlier, a couple of months ago, Linda was working out like stats about, trying to spin sock yarn. She was trying to replicate a sock yarn. She was trying to figure out, twists per inch and ratios and all the technical aspects of being able to spin the yarn that she wanted to replicate. And so she says, here, I am the boss. After a zillion attempts, I have spun the sock yarn that I want. I had to make sure that the singles were slightly under twisted and then the ply was slightly over twisted. And that sweet spot was always hard to maintain, even with an e-spinner. And I realized that spinning for shorter periods of time prevented me from rushing or falling into my default rhythm. I used a metronome for the plying count. And so the fiber she's using is 75-25 superwash merino and nylon. The singles were spun at 50 to 55 wraps per inch, and the final 4 ply came in at 19 wraps per inch. This is amazing. I mean, like, obviously, you have the yarn at the end of the day. It's beautiful yarn. It's going to make beautiful socks. Very excited to see how that all turns out. But the fact that, like, yes, you're measuring the singles, the reps per inch, trying to get it very, very consistent reps per inch. The fact that it's 4 ply, that's a lot of spinning. 4 ply to make your sock yarn. The 4 ply, that's 4 plies. That's a lot of spinning. And to make that a nice round, hard wearing, solid yarn that's slightly over twisted in the plying. And this whole idea that spinning for shorter periods of time allows you to be more consistent rather than like spinning for a long time and then eventually getting tired or changing your speed or rhythm or anything like that. So that is really, really great observations. I really, really like that. And the fact that you used a metronome for the plying count. I think we talked before about maybe like using a playlist with a set number of RPM, kind of like a running playlist. You can kind of work with that to get that, even consistent rhythm and timing. But that's fantastic. Congratulations, Linda. It looks amazing. This one is from Nancy. So Nancy has posted her learning plan as well. And so for June, July, and August, her plans were to learn how to warp a rigid heddle loom in 3 different ways. So in our rigid heddle weaving basics class, I believe I show 2 different ways of warping a rigid heddle loom. One of them is the direct warping method, which is basically that method where you warp the loom and then you're walking and winding your warp yarn around a peg, and then you come back to the loom, and then you walk back to the peg, and then you walk back and forth, and then that's a direct warping method with a peg. There's another method which is called the indirect warping method, where basically you take your yarn and you wind it on a warping board first, where you wind your warp, on a warping board or warping mill or some other way, and then you transfer your wound warp to your rigid heddle loom, and then you dress the rigid heddle loom that way. So I show both of those methods. And then there is another method which Liz Gibson teaches, and it's called the hybrid method. And so it's basically, the idea is that you have your loom, your rigid heddle loom set up, and rather than taking your warp yarn and winding it around a peg, you then wind it around a warping board that is next to your loom. And so then you're getting the benefit of a longer warp without having to walk super, super long to get your peg. So you can wind a longer warp, but you don't have to do that indirect method where you're then having to dress the loom and transfer that warp that way. So there's 3 different ways of warping a rigid heddle loom. And then her experiment was just like to learn about rigid heddle weaving and weave some samplers. So this, I believe, she said this is a photo of her second ever project on the 10-inch Cricut loom. So that is fantastic. It is getting started with weaving and learning how all of that works. And also this summer, she's going to be woodworking to make her own shuttles, which is very cool. Wanted to share this project with you guys. This is Nadine's about using your handspun. And so you can see she's put a little bit of a lock of Jacob sheep fleece right here so that you can kind of see. I don't know why my cursor is in the wrong place. But in any case, so here is the fleece that she spun from. And then she spun this yarn, and she says, I have to get rid of this perfectionist point of view. Attention to detail isn't always useful. She says, I finish the yarn and then I fret over all of these lumps and bumps, but then after knitting them, they disappear. mostly. And so she says she was convinced that knitting with her hand spun was going to make this sort of like messy looking appearance after knitting, but it actually turned out beautifully. Like, it's beautiful. And I think that sometimes we're spinning and we're like, yeah, if you're nitpicking over every little lump and bump and you're worried about the consistency of your yarn, but at the end of the day, it all kind of comes out in the wash. It all just kind of like evens out and becomes overall just beautiful and consistent, and it looks great. It really, really looks beautiful. So hand spun, natural, undyed Jacob fleece, just the natural color is absolutely beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing that, Nadine. And this one is our last one. This one is Juliet. Juliet, if you're still here in the chat. This one is a big long thread about spinning boucle. Absolutely gorgeous. These were the last photos that Juliet shared about her boucle. But you can see that they are spun on that Dreaming Robots EEW6, I believe is what she has. And then I had asked her about like whether or not it was difficult to get the boucle, the little lumps and bumps of boucle, to go through the little yarn guides on the e-spinner or on your wheel or anything like that. Because sometimes those little lumps and bumps might catch, and then you have trouble getting the yarn onto the bobbin and getting it to wind on. But she said that she's using these little aftermarket yarn guides. I don't know what they're called, but they're from Snortimer's Hub, which is a company that is making sort of aftermarket 3D printed add-ons for things like e-spinners and things like that. So Snortimer's Hub, if you look them up online, they sell a whole bunch of different kinds of things, including 3D printed bobbins for your e-spinner. So yes, Juliet saying thank you. That was a core spun yarn that I played with, and it gave a boucle look. Yes, so it gave a boucle look. But if you go back onto this whole thread, this spinning boucle yarn demo thread, and also the photo that I showed at the start of today's session where I showed that e-spinner on her boat, and that was boucle yarn, it was like, yeah, if you follow that whole thread, you can see up close what the boucle looks like, and talking about where the boucle lesson was. And the boucle lesson was in Rachel Smith's class about spinning sheep breeds. And so that came up, I believe, in one of the long wool sections where Rachel gave a demo of spinning boucle and talking about how that all works as a yarn structure. But these photos are gorgeous, really lovely. It's neat to see like that you can make all of this really super textured yarn and it not be a problem with an e-spinner or anything like that. And it's just really fun. It's beautiful. I'm curious what you're going to make with the yarn now that you have it. Yeah. Curious to see what that will become. Now, oh, Juliet's saying, I think Snortimers calls them ceramic yarn guides. Yes. Yeah, yours are very, I like the color of these ones. That kind of like copper, metallic copper look. I've become very enamored with 3D printed fiber arts tools recently. And I was even talking to somebody yesterday about how easy or difficult it would be to get into 3D printing. I'm very curious about printing some things. But he was saying, oh yeah, it's really, really easy. Like the machine itself, the 3D printer itself is easy. It's the software, it's learning the software to be able to design the things that you want in order to print them. But say if I was going on Thingiverse and then downloading patterns that people have already made and then just printing them, that should theoretically be easy, right? So that is something that I wanted to be a summer project, but we'll see. Maybe later. Okay, so now we are here at our giveaway. Our giveaway, again, is going to be for 2 braids of Corriedale, because again, we are still spinning. We are still spinning a lot of things. And if you want to save them for September when we do a spin along, and say you want to experiment with Katrina's class on spinning up a level and spin all different kinds of drafting techniques, or say you want to take 2 braids of fiber and blend the colors together like Diana Twist has and make a rainbow, or make a chain plied gradient yarn, or spin for socks, or spin for weaving, 2 braids of Corriedale fiber. very, very excited about all of that. So if you guys go to this link, schoolofsweetgeorgia.com/July Live 2023, we have there, it's basically like 2 or 3 questions, and we just ask, what was this live office hours like for you? Was it helpful? What kind of information would you take away and use next time? What are you going to put into action? All of these kinds of things. And so that helps us sort of determine what we do for future live office hours sessions. But yeah, it's also great to hear your feedback about what you found useful and all these kinds of things. So if you go there, what we do is we take all the submissions and then we do a random draw, and the randomly picked winner will win 2 braids of Cordale fiber, whichever colorways that you like. And we have new colorways for fall as well. So excited about all of that. So that is basically it for today. Just thank you guys, as always, for being here, for being a part of the school, for sharing your time with us. Thank you for being here for an hour to sit and talk about the fiber arts and to celebrate all the things that people have made. It's wonderful, as always, to see you guys. And so next month, we're going to be here again. We're going to be here a week earlier because of scheduling. But yeah, we'll be here again. And so thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for sharing all the projects that you've done, and excited for all of this. So thank you. I will see you guys in the next one. All right. Bye, everybody. Bye for now.